Money can buy almost everything, except the ability to erase the past. Some mistakes follow like shadows, no matter how high we climb, how much we try to run. This is a story about second chances, hidden truths, and the collision between a carefully constructed life and the ghosts of choices we thought were buried forever. What happens when the woman you abandoned years ago walks back into your life, not as a memory, but as that person caring for what you hold most precious? Before we begin, tell us in the comments, where are you watching this from? We love hearing from our viewers around the world, and if you enjoy stories that keep you on the edge of your seat, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, so you won't miss the next incredible tales we have coming your way. Hit that notification bell. The late afternoon sun filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse on Manhattan's Upper East Side, casting golden rectangles across the marble floor. Alexander stood in his home office, phone pressed to his ear, barely listening to his assistant's update about the Tokyo merger. His attention drifted to the sounds coming from the living room, his 5-year-old son's laughter mixing with a woman's gentle voice. It was a sound that had become familiar over the past 3 weeks since he'd hired the new nanny, yet something about it unsettled him in a way he called into a name. Mr. Hayes, are you still there? His assistant's voice got through. Yes, finally's the deal. I trust your judgment, Alexander said curtly, ending the call. He was 42 years old, had built a tech empire worth billions, and prided himself on his ability to read people and situations with surgical precision. Yet lately, he felt off balance, and he hated it. He walked toward the living room, his Italian leather shoes silent on the polished floor. Through the doorway, he observed the scene before him. His son, Henry, sat on the carpet surrounded by building blocks, his small face bright with concentration. Beside him, cross-legged and patient, was Emma Clarke, the nanny his mother had recommended after the previous one had quit without notice. Emma was pointing to one of Henry's block structures, saying something that made the boy giggle. She wore simple jeans and a cream-colored sweater, her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. There was nothing remarkable about her appearance, nothing that should have caught his attention. Yet Alexander found himself studying her profile, searching for something he couldn't identify. "Daddy!" Henry spotted it and jumped up, running over with a partially built tower in his hands. "Look what Miss Emma taught me. It has called an arch, and it is super strong." Alexander crouched down, examining his son's work with genuine interest. "That is impressive, buddy. You were becoming the architect." "Miss Emma says architecture is about making beautiful things that last," Henry said proudly, and Alexander caught Emma's eyes over his son's head. She was watching him with an expression that seemed almost sad, though she smiled quickly when their gazes met. "That is right," Alexander said, straightening up. "Henry, why don't you wash up for dinner? I need to discuss this week's schedule with Miss Clarke." The boy scampered off, and Emma rose gracefully to her feet, gathering scattered toys with practiced efficiency. "Of course, Mr. Hayes. Henry has been doing wonderfully with his writing. We finished the chapter books this week. I appreciate your dedication," Alexander said, something nagging at him as he watched him off around the room. "Have we met before? Before you started working here, I mean?" Emma's hands stilled for just a fraction of a second before she continued to ding. "I don't believe so, Mr. Hayes. I would remember meeting someone of your prominence." It was the right answer, polite and deferential, but something in the way she said it felt rehearsed. Alexander was about to press further when his phone buzzed with an urgent message. The moment passed. Over the following days, Alexander found himself increasingly aware of Emma's presence in his home. She was exceptional with Henry, patient and creative, turning every moment into a learning opportunity. His son had become more confident, more verbal, clearly thriving under her care. Yet there were small things that bothered Alexander, pieces that didn't fit. The way she seemed to know exactly how he took his coffee without being told. How she'd instinctively known that Henry was allergic to strawberries before it had come up in conversation. The fact that she seemed to anticipate his schedule with uncanny accuracy, having Henry ready for bed just as Alexander returned from late meetings. One evening, Alexander returned home earlier than usual. The October air had turned crisp, and through the windows, He could see the city lights beginning to twinkle in the dusk. He heard voices from Henry's room and paused in the hallway, not wanting to interrupt the bedtime routine. "Miss Emma, do you have a family?" Henry's young voice asked. There was a pause, long enough that Alexander leaned closer to hear Emma's response. "I have a sister," Emma said softly. "She lives in Boston. We live very close." "What about a mommy and daddy?" Another pause. "My parents passed away when I was younger, sweetheart. But I have wonderful memories of them." "That is sad," Henry said with a child's simple empathy. "Daddy says my mommy is in heaven though. She got sick when I was a baby." "I know, Henry. And I bet she is very proud of the amazing boy you were becoming." Alexander's jaw tightened. His wife, Catherine, had died of an aggressive cancer when Henry was barely 6 months old. It had been the darkest period of his life, made bearable only by his determination to build something lasting for his son. He rarely spoke about Catherine, the pain still tore raw even after 5 years. He stepped back from the door, retreating to his office. Something was gnawing at him, a feeling he couldn't shake. He pulled out his laptop and opened the background check his department had conducted on Emma Clarke. Everything was in order: pristine references, degree in early childhood education from a respectable state university, previous employment with families in Connecticut and New Jersey. Nothing suspicious, nothing that explained his unease. Yet as he stared at her employment photo, something clicked in his memory, sharp and sudden like a camera flash. Not your face exactly, but something about the set of her shoulders, the way she held her head. He closed his eyes, trying to grasp the memory that danced just out of reach. The next morning was Saturday, and Alexander had blocked out the day to spend with Henry. But when he emerged from his bedroom, he found Emma already in the kitchen, making pancakes, while Henry sat at the counter, chattering about a movie they'd watched the night before. "I didn't realize you'd be here today," Alexander said, accepting the cup of coffee Emma handed him. "It's your day off. Henry mentioned you had that important conference call this morning," Emma said, who was not keep meeting his. "I thought you might appreciate the help." Alexander hadn't mentioned any call to Henry, and his calendar was private. The only way she could have known was, but no, there were plenty of logical explanations. Perhaps his assistant had mentioned it when confirming schedules. "That is very thoughtful," he said carefully, "but I actually canceled the call. I wanted to take Henry to the Natural History Museum today." "Oh." Emma's composure slipped for just a moment, surprise and something else, maybe disappointment, crossing her face. "That's wonderful. Henry will love that. Why don't you join us?" Alexander found himself saying, surprising himself as much as Emma. "You've been working hard, and Henry clearly enjoys your company." Emma hesitated, conflict playing across her features. "You wouldn't want to intrude on your father's team. Please, Miss Emma." Henry bounced on his seat. "You have to come. You promised you'd show me how to identify different dinosaurs." "Then it is settled," Alexander said, watching Emma's face carefully. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. The museum was crowded with weekend families, the grand halls echoing with excited children's voices. Alexander found himself hanging back, watching as Emma guided Henry through the exhibits with obvious knowledge and enthusiasm. She explained the difference between herbivores and carnivores, made up silly voices for the prehistoric creatures, and somehow made learning feel like the best game in the world. As they stood before the massive Tyrannosaurus Rex skeleton, Henry pressing his face against the protective barrier, Alexander moved closer to Emma. "You were very good with him," he said quietly. "He is his special child," Emma replied, her voice thick with emotion. "Curious, kind, thoughtful. You've raised him well. I had a lot of help. My mother, the nannies, my late wife as parents." He paused. "It is not easy, being a single father." Emma turned to look at him then, really look at him, and Alexander was struck by the depth of sadness in her eyes. "No, I imagine it isn't. But you were doing a wonderful job. Henry is lucky to have you." "Sometimes I wonder if he am enough," Alexander admitted, surprising himself with the confession. "If he needs more than just financial security and a father who is too often distracted by work." Children need presence, not perfection, Emma said softly. And I see the way he lights up when you come home. That is what matters. They stood in silence for a moment, watching Henry, and Alexander felt an odd connection, as if this woman understood something fundamental about his life that others didn't. That night, after Henry was asleep, Alexander found Emma gathering her things to leave. On impulse, he poured 2 glasses of wine and offered her one. I hope I am not overstepping, he said, but I wanted to thank you properly. Henry is happier than he'd seen him in a long time. Emma accepted the glass, perching carefully on the edge of the sofa. He is a joy to care for. Tell me about yourself, Alexander said, settling into the chair across from her. I hear Lizzie hired you to care for my son, but I know very little about you. Emma's fingers tightened around the wine glass. There is not much to tell. I grew up in a small town in Pennsylvania, went to college, discovered I love working with children. Pretty ordinary story. I doubt that, Alexander said. Everyone has a story. What made you choose this career? Emma was quiet for so long that Alexander thought she might not answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. I wanted to make a difference in children's lives. To be there for them in ways that she trailed off, then started again. To give them the stability and care that every child deserves. That sounds personal, Alexander observed. Maybe it is, Emma said, meeting his eyes with sudden intensity. Isn't it all good work personal in some way? Before Alexander could respond, Emma stood abruptly. I should go. It is late, and I have an early start tomorrow. Emma, wait, Alexander said, rising as well. I am sorry if I made you uncomfortable. I didn't mean to pry. You didn't, Emma said, but she wouldn't look at him. Good night, Mr. Hayes. After she left, Alexander stood in the middle of his living room, that nagging feeling stronger than ever. He walked to his office and pulled out an old box from the bottom drawer of his desk, something he hadn't opened in over a decade. Inside were photographs from his college years, back when he'd been a different person, before the money and success, before Catherine, before everything. He rifled through the images, most of them showing a younger, more carefree version of himself at parties, on road trips, at football games. Then he found it, a photo he'd forgotten existed. It was from a study abroad program in Italy, the summer before his senior year. He was standing with his arm around a young woman, both of them laughing at something off camera. The woman had long dark hair, bright eyes, and a smile that had once made his heart race. Her name had been Emma. Alexander's hand shook as he held the photograph. It had been 20 years ago, a summer romance that had felt all-consuming at the time. She'd been an art history student, passionate and idealistic, talking endlessly about beauty and meaning and making the world better. He'd been captivated by her, drawn to her warmth and authenticity in a way that felt different from anything he'd experienced before. They'd spent every moment together that summer, exploring ancient ruins, sharing dreams over cheap wine, making promises they both believed they'd keep. But when the program ended and they'd returned to their respective schools, reality had set in. Alexander had been laser-focused on his startup, working 18-hour days, and Emma had been on the other side of the country. The relationship had faded, not with drama but with distance and silence. No, that wasn't entirely true. Alexander closed his eyes, forcing himself to remember what he'd spent years trying to forget. Emma had reached out during their senior year. She'd call her, left messages, sent emails that grew increasingly urgent. But he'd been consumed with Ventura Capital meetings and product launches, convinced he was building something that would change the world. Her messages had felt like distractions from his purpose, emotional complications he didn't have time for. The last email she'd sent had said she needed to talk to him about something important. He'd never responded. A few months later, he'd heard through mutual friends that she'd left school. He'd felt a pang of guilt, but he'd pushed it aside, telling himself that she'd moved on with her life just as he had with his. Now, staring at the photograph, Alexander felt sick. Was it possible? Could Emma Clarke, his son's nanny, be the same Emma from his past? The years had changed them both, And he'd been so wrapped up in his own world that he'd barely looked at her, really looked at her, until now. He grabbed his laptop and pulled up her employment records again, this time digging deeper. Emma Clarke, age 41, born in Pennsylvania. He found her college information and his blood ran cold. She'd attended the same university he had been part of the same study abroad program. She'd left school in the spring of her senior year and finished her degree years later at a different institution. The timeline fit. Everything fit. Alexander didn't sleep at night. He sat in his office as the city lights gave way to dawn, wrestling with questions that terrified him. If Emma Clarke was his Emma, why hadn't she said anything? Why had she taken a job caring for his son? And what had been so important that she'd tried so desperately to reach him all those years ago? When Emma arrived Monday morning, Alexander was waiting. He'd sent Henry to his mother's house for the day, claiming a last-minute business crisis. Emma's smile faltered when she saw his expression. "Mr. Hayes, is everything all right? Where is Henry?" he asked with his grandmother. Alexander said, his voice tight. "We need to talk, Emma. Or should I say, we need to talk again." After 20 years, the color drained from Emma's face. For a long moment, she simply stood there, her bag sliding from her shoulder to the floor. Then, slowly, she nodded. "I was wondering when you'd figure it out," she said quietly. "Though part of me hoped you never would." "Sit down," Alexander said, gesturing to the sofa. His hands were shaking with a mixture of anger, confusion, and something else he called into name. "And please, for God's sake, tell me the truth. All of it." Emma said, her posture rigid, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. When she looked up at him, her eyes were filled with tears. "Where do you want me to start?" she asked. "Start with why you were here. Why you took this job when you knew exactly who I was." Emma took a shaky breath. "I saw the job posting through an agency. When I saw your name, I knew it had to be you. Alexander Hayes, tech billionaire, widower with a 5-year-old son. I thought about ignoring it, about walking away like you've been doing for 20 years. But then I saw Henry's picture in one of those magazine profiles about successful single fathers, and her voice broke. I had to see him. I had to know he was okay." "Why?" Alexander demanded, though a terrible suspicion was already forming in his mind. "Why would you care about my son?" Emma's tears spilled over. "Because I spent 20 years wondering. Because after that summer in Italy, after everything we shared, I tried to tell you something important, and you wouldn't even return my calls. I was pregnant, Alexander, and you didn't know what to do." The room tilted. Alexander gripped the arm of his chair, feeling like he'd been punched in the chest. "What? I found out a few weeks after we got back to the States," Emma continued, her words coming faster now, as if a dam had broken. "I was terrified and alone, and I tried to reach you. I called, I emailed, I even showed up at your campus once, but your roommate said you were too busy to see anyone. I sent you a letter, told you I was pregnant, told you I needed help deciding what to do. You never responded." "I never got a letter," Alexander said, his voice hoarse. "Emma, I swear, I never got a letter." "Well, I sent one," Emma said bitterly. "But by then, you'd figured out that you'd made your choice. You had your startup and your grand plans, and I was just a summer fling you'd outgrown, so I made my choice too." "What did you do?" Alexander asked, though he was terrified of the answer. "I was going to keep the baby," Emma said, meeting his eyes with something like defiance. "He'd decided that even if you didn't want to be part of it, I would raise our child. My parents were gone, but I had my sister, and I thought I could manage. But then, at 20 weeks, I went in for a routine ultrasound, and they found serious complications. The doctors said continuing the pregnancy would likely be fatal for both of us." Alexander felt like he called in to breathe. "Emma, I had to make an impossible choice," Emma said, tears streaming down her face. "And I made it, but it destroyed me. I left school, fell into a depression, spent years trying to put my life back together. Eventually, I went back to college, got my degree, built a career working with children because it was the only way I could heal. And I told myself he'd moved on, that he'd forgiven you for not being there. But you hadn't, Alexander said quietly. No, Emma admitted. Yeah, didn't. And when I saw that you had a son, a child who would be about the same age me would have been if things had been different, I felt this overwhelming need to see him, to make sure he was loved and cared for, to give him the attention and care that our child never got to receive. Alexander stood and walked to the window, his mind reeling. I don't know what to say. If I had known, Emma, if I had gotten that letter, everything would have been different. I would have been there. I would have helped you figure it out. Would you? Emma asked it, and there was no accusation in her voice, only genuine question. You were so driven, so focused on your success. Would you really have dropped everything for a girl you didn't know for one summer? Alexander turned to Fassler. I don't know, he said honestly. I was a different person then, selfish, ambitious, so convinced that nothing mattered more than building my company. I am not proud of who I was. You built an incredible life, Emma said, gesturing around the luxurious penthouse. You achieved everything you set out to do, and you have Henry, who is wonderful and perfect and everything a child should be. But at what cost? Alexander asked. Emma, you went through hell alone because I was too self-absorbed to even answer your calls. I can't change that, and I'll have to live with it for the rest of my life. But I need to understand, why are you really here? Is this about revenge? About making me pay for what happened? No, Emma said firmly. God, no. Alexander, I am here because when I saw Henriette's picture, something in me broke and healed at the same time. I realized that even though he couldn't save our child, I could help yours. I could give him the love and care and attention he deserves. I could be present in a way that matters, even if he never knows the whole truth. Does he remind you of what we lost? Alexander asked gently. Every single day, Emma whispered, but he also reminds me that life goes on, that there is still beauty and joy and possibility in the world. Taking care of Henry has been the most healing thing he's done in 20 years. They sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of the past heavy between them. Finally, Alexander spoke. I want to make this right, Emma. I don't know how, but I need to try. You deserve so much better than what I gave you. You can't fix the past, Emma said. Evie learned it the hard way. But maybe we can figure out what to do with the present. What do you want? Alexander asked. From this situation, what do you want? Emma was quiet for a long time, considering. I want to keep taking care of Henry, she finally said. I know that probably sounds strange after everything, but he has become important to me, not as a replacement for what I lost, but as a person I genuinely care about. He deserves someone in his life who sees him, really sees him, not just as the heir to a fortune but as a child who needs love and attention. You think I don't see him that way? Alexander asked, defensive. I think you love him deeply, Emma said carefully. But I also think you were terrified of failing him the way you failed me. You bury yourself in work because it has to suffer immeasurable, and you can always do more, make more, build more. But Henry doesn't need more. He needs you, present and engaged, not just at bedtime but in all the messy, complicated moments in between. Alexander felt the truth of her words like a knife. You were right, he admitted. Evie been so afraid of making mistakes that Evie let others do most of that while parenting. It was easier to justify because I was providing for him financially, building a legacy. But that's not enough, is it? No, Emma said gently. It is not. But the good news is, it has not a lot. Henry is young, and he adores you. You have time to change the pattern. Will you help me? Alexander asked, not just as his nanny, but will you help me learn how to be the father he deserves? Emma studied him for a long moment. On one condition. Anything. You have to be honest with me, and with yourself, about why you were really doing this. Is it guilt? Is it some attempt to atone for the past? Because Henry deserves better than to be part of your redemption story. It is not about redemption, Alexander said, surprised by his own clarity. It is about recognition. For the first time in years, maybe decades, I am seeing clearly what actually matters. And it is not the next merger, the stock price, or any of the things you've been chasing. It is being present for the people who matter. While there is still teen, Emma nodded slowly. Okay then, we'll figure this out together. Over the following weeks, something shifted in his household. Alexander began leaving work earlier, turning off his phone during dinner, engaging in the minutiae of Henry's life that he did previously left the others. He sat through detailed explanations of Lego constructions, learned the names of every Pokémon, and discovered that reading bedtime stories was surprisingly meditative. Emma watched this transformation with mixed feelings. She was genuinely happy to see father and son bonding, to see Henry Bloom honor Alexander as he increased attention. But she also felt the complexity of her own position growing more tangled. She did come to this job seeking closure, a way to make peace with your past. Instead, she found herself increasingly drawn into Alexander's orbit, the old feelings she had thought long buried stirring to life in inconvenient ways. One evening, after Henry had fallen asleep, Alexander knocked on the door of the guest room Emma sometimes used when she stayed late. She opened it, surprised to find him holding two mugs of tea. "Can we talk?" he asked. They sat on the small balcony off the guest room, the city sprawling below them in a carpet of lights. Alexander handed her a mug and they sat in comfortable silence for a moment. "You've been thinking," Alexander said finally, "about what you said, about Henry needing to know who he is beyond being my son. And you've been thinking about all the experiences you've missed because I was so busy building an empire. Where is this going?" Emma asked carefully. "I want to take a sabbatical," Alexander said. 3 months, maybe 6. I want to travel with Henry, show him the world, be present for all of it. And I want you to come with us." Emma nearly dropped her mug. "Alexander, I don't think that is a good idea." "Why not? You were his nanny, and you've become important in his life. Plus," he paused, meeting her eyes, "I think we have 20 years of conversations we never got to have. Maybe it is time we had them. What about your company? You can't just walk away for 6 months." "I have excellent people running every division," Alexander said. "And frankly, if the company can't survive without me for a few months, you've built it wrong." "Emma, I'm 42 years old. You've spent 2 decades building something that will outlast me, but you've neglected to build a life worth living. I don't want to wake up in 20 years and realize you've made the same mistake twice." "This isn't about me," Emma said firmly. "Don't make this about trying to recapture some summer romance from 20 years ago. That is not fair to either of us." "You were right," Alexander agreed. "It is not about recapturing the past. But maybe it is about acknowledging that what we had mattered, that it shaped both of us in ways we were still discovering. And maybe, just maybe, we deserve a chance to know each other as the people we've become, not just the kids we were." Emma was quiet for a long time, staring out at the city. "I need to think about it," she finally said. "Take all the time you need," Alexander said. "But Emma, thank you for everything you've done for Henry and for forcing me to see what is actually important. Whatever you'd see, I'm grateful you came back into my life." The next day, Emma took an unplanned day off, telling Alexander she needed time to think. She took the train to Boston to visit her sister, Sarah, who still lived in the same small apartment they shared after their parents died. Sarah took one look at Emma's face and pulled her into a hug. "What happened?" Over coffee, Emma told her everything, the words tumbling out in a rush. Sarah listened without interrupting, her expression moving from shock to concern to something that might have been understanding. "So let me get this straight," Sarah said when Emma finished. "The man who broke your heart 20 years ago, the father of the baby you lost, has just asked you to travel the world with him and his son, and you are not sure what to do." "When you put it like that, it sounds insane," Emma admitted. "It is insane," Sarah said bluntly. "But that doesn't mean it is wrong. You've been frozen in the past for 2 decades. You've built a good life, but you've never let yourself truly move forward. Maybe this is your chance, or maybe it is a disaster waiting to happen," Emma countered. "What if I get attached to Henry and this all falls apart? What if Alexander is just acting out of guilt? What if I am fooling myself into thinking there could be something real here? What if there could be Sarah asked gently. Emma, you've spent 20 years asking what if about the past. Maybe it asked Timothy asked what if about the future. Emma returned to New York the next evening to find Alexander and Henry making dinner together, the kitchen in cheerful chaos. Henry was covered in flour, giggling as Alexander tried to show him how to roll pasta dough. Miss Emma, Henry called out. Look, we were making spaghetti from scratch. Daddy said it is what people do in Italy. Emma felt her heart clench. That's wonderful, Henry. After dinner, after Henry was in bed, Emma found Alexander cleaning up the kitchen. She picked up a dish towel and started drying dishes, and they worked in comfortable silence for a few minutes. I'll go with you, Emma said finally, on your trip. But we need to set some boundaries. This is for Henry, to give him experiences and memories. It is not about you in trying to rewrite history. Agreed, Alexander said, though he was smiling. Strictly professional. Just two people who happen to have a complicated past traveling the world with a 5-year-old. I am serious, Alexander. So am he said, his smile fading. Emma, I know I hurt you. I know I can't undo that. But I am grateful for the second chance, however it unfolds. Thank you for trusting me enough to say yes. They left 3 weeks later, after Alexander had shocked his board of directors by announcing his sabbatical, and Emma had packed and repacked her bag a dozen times. They started in Italy, retracing some of the steps Alexander and Emma had taken 20 years earlier, though now with a curious 5-year-old in tow. In Rome, they visited the Colosseum and Henry declared himself a gladiator. In Florence, Emma showed them the museum she'd fallen in love with during that long-ago summer, and watched Alexander watch Henry experience art for the first time. In Venice, they got lost in the winding streets and it felt like no time had passed at all. One evening, standing on a bridge over a quiet canal while Henry threw bread to the ducks below, Alexander turned to Emma. Do you remember that restaurant near the Spanish Steps? The one where we went on our last night, with the terrible wine and the incredible pasta? Emma smiled. How could I forget? You said you'd bring me back someday. I know I am 20 years late, Alexander said, but would you let me get on the promise? There is a highly rated babysitter service I found, and I think Henry would enjoy an evening with Italian cartoons and gelato. Emma hesitated, then nodded. Okay, but Alexander, this doesn't change anything. I know, he said. I just want one evening to say everything I should have said 2 decades ago. The restaurant was different than Emma remembered, upgraded and polished, but the basic charm remained. They sat at a corner table with a view of the steps, and for the first course, they made small talk about Henry and their travels. But as the wine flowed and the evening deepened, the conversation turned more serious. I need the apologies properly, Alexander said, for not being there when you needed me. For being so wrapped up in my own ambitions that I couldn't see past them. For making you go through the worst experience of your life alone. There is no excuse, Emma. I was selfish and cruel, even if it wasn't intentional. Evie spent a long time being angry, Emma admitted. But Evie also spent a long time understanding that we were both so young. You were chasing your dreams, and you didn't know how to ask for help effectively. We were both struggling in our own ways. That is generous, Alexander said. More generous than I deserve. Maybe, Emma said, but holding on to anger is only hurt me. I am ready to let it go. What would you have done? Alexander asked quietly. If the pregnancy had been viable, if you'd been able to keep the baby, would you have told me? I don't know, Emma said honestly. I'd like to think I would have tried harder, found a way to make you listen. But I was so hurt by your silence that part of me wanted to prove I could do it alone. Stupid pride. If I had known, Alexander said, if I had been there, would you have wanted to keep it? I think so, Emma said. I'd already started imagining a future, started making plans. I'd decided to take a semester off, find work, move closer to my sister. I was scared but also excited. And then in one ultrasound appointment, all of that disappeared. They sat in silence for a moment, honoring the ghost of what might have been. Then Alexander reached across the table and took Emma's hand. I can give you back what you lost, he said, but I want you to know that I see you, really see you, maybe for the first time. And you know of your strength, your grace, your ability to turn your pain into something that helps others. You were remarkable, Emma Clarke. Emma filters quick her eyes. Don't you romanticize me, Alexander. I am not some noble martyr. I made choices too, some of them out of hurt and pride, and I came into your life under false pretenses, using your son as some kind of emotional proxy. That's not healthy or right. Maybe not, Alexander agreed, but you've also given Henry something precious, attention and care that he wasn't getting from me. You've made me a better father just by showing him what presence looks like. That matters, Emma. It matters more than you know. They talked until the restaurant began closing around them, reopening doors that had been sealed for 20 years. It wasn't a feeling exactly, but it was acknowledgement, and it was its own kind of grace. The next 2 months passed in a blur of new cities and shared experiences. They went to Greece and taught Henry about ancient mythology. In France, they visited castles and ate croissants for breakfast. In Switzerland, they rode trains through mountain passes that took Emma's breath away. And slowly, carefully, Alexander and Emma began to rebuild something that wasn't a kid friendship and wasn't a kid romance, but was entirely their own. Henry blossomed under the constant attention of both his father and Emma. He became more confident, more articulate, more willing to try new things. And in quiet moments, Emma watched Alexander watch his son and saw something shift in his eyes, a softening.